after those days. When you see these times, know that the end is near. Jesus, even further in that, says all of these things will happen to this generation. But pay attention to that. He said, when you see these things, false Christs, the destruction of the temple, know that my coming is near. All of these things will happen to this generation, to the disciples. And it did. But when you see all of these things, know that it's near. Then Jesus goes on to say something really interesting. He says, but of that day or hour, no one knows. The angels don't know. Not even the Son knows. Jesus himself didn't know. Only the Father. So what does he mean? When you see the destruction of Jerusalem, that's the sign that my return is imminent. It can happen any moment. But what is Jesus going to say in the rest of chapter 24 and chapter 25? He's going to give them a bunch of parables and things about how the master's delaying. How are you acting in the meantime? Once Jerusalem fell, Jesus could have returned any minute. That means that all of human history, Jesus has been right there at the door ever since the fall of Jerusalem. But the question is, if he should delay, how will you act? How will you live? Last time we saw that if Jesus would want us to know one thing about the future, it is to persevere. Persevere when difficulty comes. Jesus does give more detail, and we've seen that here. When he gives more detail, however, the message doesn't change that much. He says conflict is coming, and he assures us that a resolution is coming. And I hope you haven't taken this as like, oh man, it was talking about the destruction of the temple. I was hoping it was talking about my times. I hope you don't take it that way, because this was a message for the disciples, for the very things that many of them saw. But it's also a message for us. And Revelation, Paul talks about this in Thessalonians as well, but Revelation especially will, I think, fill in a little bit more details for things that are yet future to us. But even here, we can see and should expect that history works in patterns, right? Antiochus Epiphanes came, set up the abomination of desolation, tribulation. The Romans came, tribulation. And we too await great tribulation. And when things happen, when people are opposed to God, we should be able to read the words of Jesus and say, I'm not caught off guard. We shouldn't necessarily think it's got to be the very last thing. It might be, but trouble's coming. Like any good story, there's conflict before there's resolution.